So something I saw floating around on my Twitter yesterday is a debate between the streamer called, is he called Vaush or Vaush? I don't really know what his exact pronunciation is because I don't actually watch him, but I'm well aware of him. And with someone who is a self-described Black nationalist. And I want to take this opportunity in this video to talk about Black nationalism and how it's different from white nationalism, and you can't really conflate the two terms and even say they're very similar. But I want to also get into the debate he was having, and I want to say to start with, this isn't like a cancelling or saying this guy is a bad dude or anything like that. I just want to pick apart some of the things that he was saying and why I think it's problematic to kind of even suggest there are massive similarities between white supremacists and Black nationalists, or as people would, I guess, say, white nationalists rather than white supremacists. So in his debate with Dear Angel, he said numerous things, and this clip might be a bit long, but I feel it's important to really get into what he's saying. So that's why I'm going to use a thread I found on Twitter, and there's lots of things that he says which I would normally skip, but I want to be fair to him and not mischaracterize everything he was saying. So let's start with the first clip.
Black nationalists basically try to push for preserving not only Black cultures, which I think is important to preserve.
I don't give a fuck about preserving culture. What? That's exactly the same as a white ethno-nationalist argument.
Wait, not finished. It's not only about that, but because for example, my culture has been almost completely eradicated from this earth. My mother's side of the family descend from Maya people. Our culture has been destroyed by conquerors. My father's side of the family nearly wiped out because of the slave trade. Have no more ethnic or cultural attachment to the West African countries. This is a very destructive thing. This is not good. Yeah. I have no problem with people enjoying their culture and having a cultural identity. If you want to say that culture does not matter, then white supremacy must disappear first before you can say culture does not matter.
You can't preserve or protect culture, like, ever. I'm white. I can't protect, like, what? There's no such thing as white culture. Like, what would I say?
So yeah, it's not too great that he starts off by saying it's the same argument that white nationalists use and saying you can't preserve culture. It seems to be not understanding the power dynamics at play with something like white nationalism, but let's continue. I don't want to unfairly use this one clip to make my point.
I just want to be really careful with the language here because there are ways for cultures to stop existing in ways that I think are perfectly fine. Normally, when a culture is destroyed, this is usually a byproduct of harm taking place to the individuals who subscribe to that culture. Not so much like, it's very difficult to destroy a culture without also like hurting the people who subscribe to it, you know? If you take a look, for example, at the African Americans who had their culture stolen from them when they were taken in boats across the Atlantic, or the Native Americans who, we literally had like kill the savage, save the man, so on and so forth. We can like run down all of it. Usually when we hurt a culture, it's because we're doing damage to the community that had that culture. So when I just want to be like very careful with my language here, because if we start talking about cultures being like harmed or destroyed on their own being a bad thing, then we go back to the white nationalist rhetoric where they'll say like our culture is being destroyed when white people are as powerful as they have ever been, like geopolitically, you know? So I just want to be very careful with the distinction between harm against.
There are some points that he made in that clip that seem fairly reasonable. He talks about the Native Americans having their culture erased and Black Africans, but he says that basically you have to be targeting these people. Obviously, if you know anything about colonialism, you'll know that a lot of these empires just target the culture, and while they might harm the people as well, there are numerous examples where they keep the people but they change the culture. So obviously I'm from an Irish background. Britain nearly totally erased Irish culture. They nearly totally erased the Gaelic language, and it's making a resurgence these days. For a long time it seemed that language was going to disappear, and thanks to things like the emergence of Christianity and Christian missionaries and the English's control over Ireland, and not just Ireland, other parts of England like Cornwall or Wales or Scotland, a lot of the culture started to become more uniform and adhere to English culture. And obviously you have things like the famine, you have numerous uprisings by the Irish against the British, but they didn't genocide the whole population of Ireland, and they were erasing the culture before the famine, and they were erasing the culture after the famine. You can make an argument maybe they used the famine to accelerate this by killing people, but it's obvious the main means of erasing Irish culture wasn't through killing Irish people and thinking we're going to take all these people out. It's basically we're going to make the Irish change their ways and be more like the English. And numerous powerful people in England and English prime ministers, including the Duke of Wellington, were actually Irish as well. But they were Irish who were brought up in an Anglican English tradition. So you can have cultural erasure without the primary means of this being I'm going to kill all these people to get rid of their culture. But let's continue with the clips.
Exclusionary is exclusionary. I understand that there are different socio-political contexts and maybe different justifications, but at the end of the day, exclusionary rhetoric is exclusionary. Like, I just think there are a lot of ways to advocate for black rights and black, like prosperity in this country that don't kind of trip into this weird exclusionary zone, I guess I'm a really big fan of like MLK and MLK's like general rhetoric. I thought when I was first starting out to be a leftist, I thought that Malcolm X was cooler because he's like edgier and stuff. And I've always had a huge respect for the Black Panther Party. But I think at the end of the day, like MLK's messaging, the idea that at the end of the day, the ultimate goal should be like parity to bring us together and to fight systems of oppression that prevent that from happening, that's probably the thing that I agree with best. And I think that his methods, or at least the general approach that he took was pretty agreeable. So I worry a little bit when people who are pro-black people, which is, great, start talking about like black separationism, Black nationalism, and start talking about the need to like protect the color of their skin and their culture. It's like stuff like that like can lead in very bad directions. But again, I don't disagree. I disagree with any prescriptive statement that you've made here.
So he's not being totally unfair. In this clip, he's outlining how he, as a white person, supports the approach of MLK, which I find quite ironic because obviously, a lot of white liberals found MLK quite agreeable, and obviously in today's society, I made a whole video on this, Americans and the world in general have really created a false image of MLK and people like Nelson Mandela, where they really de-radicalize them and don't show their true message. They in essence become an apolitical symbol. So while it's great for someone like him, a white guy, presumably he lives in America, while it's great for him to say I agree with MLK more and whites and blacks should live together, and I think that's quite a sentiment that a lot of us would agree with, if someone's saying I'm a black nationalist, and in my experience, and in the experience of African and black people in America, I don't think we can actually have equality in the power structure that has been created and that is maintained. And of course, the ugly face today of white supremacy sits in the White House, but also manifests itself through all the political parties. Look who is the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party, a guy who created the crime bill, which took a racist criminal justice system, made it even more racist, imprisoned even more people of colour disproportionately on bogus charges about marijuana. So if you're a black nationalist, you're saying, these are my two options, I think black people should be able to control their own fate more and I want some separation. Again, it might not be what I agree with, but I think he's being a bit, dishonest and disingenuous in terms of saying, I think MLK is the best and I don't agree with exclusionary rhetoric. Because I think in instances like this, especially as someone who isn't a black person, I think you've got to listen to what they're saying and see what the problem is, rather than saying, I don't think you should be exclusionary, take the path of MLK. This is the civil rights leader, even though he was a lot more radical than people believed. He was one who was more acceptable. He wasn't like Malcolm X, who made people feel really uncomfortable because a lot of what he said was very accurate. It just wasn't actually very compatible with the so-called white moderate, which Martin Luther King talks about as well.
Interesting disparity. I wonder if
you have to see the difference between when a white person is like, oh, I don't want any brown babies, and when a black person is saying like, I don't want my blackness to be erased. I hope you see the difference.
Well, the only difference is how cool you sound saying it. I just want to point out, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with what you're saying. I'm just saying there are people who could say exactly what you're saying and be black separationist, supremacist nationalists. I just want to point out again, because we have to be very careful with our messaging. If taking everything that you've said at face value, it's probably fine. There is a lot of fucked up colorism, okay, out there. However, it is undeniable that somebody with more nefarious intent than you could say exactly what you just said, and they would be doing the same thing white nationalists say.
Do you think cultural appropriation is a thing?
Yeah, of course. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. It just happens. Sometimes it's good,
Okay,
sometimes it's bad.
so the type of cultural appropriation that happens to Black people is most of the time bad because we are removed from that part of the aspect of our culture that we created. I'll give you an example. I am from Belize, and these people in Belize have a specific type of culture. It's a mix between Afro Creole, Afro Caribbean, all that type. And it's important that we keep this culture because white supremacists try to destroy us, and we
But
don't want.
these are white nationalist arguments too. Right now, a huge number, like this is true, a huge number of cities all across the United Kingdom and France are having their culture completely changed by the influx of Muslim, like North African, Turkish, and what have you immigrants. And that's fine. I just, once you set down a road where you say like, this is my culture and I'm going to keep it the way it is, I think you like start getting into some really troubling territory. For one, you can't ever like meaningfully protect culture, but for two, you're inherently linking like culture to ethnicity too, like, which is why like Black nationalists advocate for an ethnic.
So I guess I'm going to end the analysis of these clips here, and basically his main point is that you've got to be careful when using Black nationalist arguments because they're very similar to white nationalist arguments, and I've sort of hinted at my opinion on that. But obviously, white nationalism comes from a place of supreme privilege. It is mainly a backlash against the growing voices of not only ethnic minorities, it is often also a backlash against other minorities like the LGBT community. I did a video in the past about straight pride being sort of a facet of white supremacy. All of that stuff goes into it. And for someone who paints himself as such an edgelord, and someone who's willing to say stuff that is unpopular, seems like quite a liberal argument to start equating white nationalism with black nationalism, basically saying in the middle, they're all bad, I don't like extremes of any kind, and they're all the same to me. It seems very similar to the argument that anti-fascists and fascists are both bad because sometimes they both use violence to achieve their ends. But I'm not going to distinguish what the ideology of one is or the other and why they're different. I'm just going to sit in the middle and be like, I don't like extremes of any kind. Can't we all just be like MLK? And it also feeds into this narrative that things like Black Lives Matter are black supremacist or just exist to promote blackness rather than they're an actual response to something. Black Lives Matter is of course a response to white supremacy in the police force. The fact that many black people and most black people in America believe that they're not treated fairly and it doesn't seem like non-white lives are worth anything. That's not a black supremacist movement. So with things like Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam to an extent, even though some people in the Nation of Islam were black supremacists rather than black nationalists, it's a response to the situation they're in. Obviously, as he himself pointed out in his clips, black people were stolen from Africa, taken to the United States and stripped of their culture. A new culture formed that was very diverse, it wasn't all the same. So it really delves into the black experience in America and why people like Malcolm X, like I highlighted before, felt like they didn't have much of a choice, is they felt like they wouldn't ever be properly accepted because they'd have to exist and navigate a society that has always been racist against them and seemingly will always be racist against them, because we look at the government today, we look at America today, we look at the West today, the rhetoric might have been dialed down, the outward white supremacy might have been changed, but in reality it isn't too different. It's still racist criminal justice systems. It's clear that black lives are worth less. So white nationalism in general seeks to create an ethno-state through generally violence and exclude everyone else and make them lesser than the white person, right? And we see that manifest in things like Nazi Germany, for example. So white nationalism essentially wants to use the existing white supremacist power structure to further their own power and really crush any challenge to it. That's white supremacy and white nationalism. Black nationalism is a reaction to a white supremacist system saying that we can't trust this system to get equality. We can't gain equality in this system. So we have to be sometimes black separationists because we're only going to have prosperity as a people if we work together and stick together and not try and operate in the system of white supremacists. And I think the difference is a lot of black nationalism is anti-racist. It's not about blacks are better than everybody else. That is something that is different than white nationalists. It's just recognizing what the reality is in a lot of regards and trying to advocate for policies based on that. You know, he said he liked the Black Panthers. What's one of the big things the Black Panthers did internally in black communities? Set up breakfast programs for school children who often couldn't get breakfast at home because their families were poor. That is an example of what black nationalists would do, improving their communities from the inside, but doing it for the benefit of their people. Now, like he's saying, I don't necessarily agree with people staying together and not being diverse and basing it all on things, you know, like race or ethnicity. But I think in this specific example, and there are others as well, we shouldn't be equating white nationalism with black nationalism just because there are maybe certain similarities about race, but then pretend like there isn't a history there or there isn't a power dynamic with each group. Again, like I said, white nationalists have the ear of the president. White nationalists already have a system that has been designed by people just like them to operate in and gain power. White nationalists can realistically create a ethno-state in the US. They can make this country where they can erase other cultures, they can kill people who don't fit into their vision of what America is. Black nationalists do not have that same power, do they? They can't take over the United States, but also that their ideology is not exclusive in the way that they just want to get rid of everyone else. It's about self-improvement, and a lot of these things coming from within, because like people like Malcolm X recognized, you just can't gain equality in this system, and you either have to get rid of your culture and become more like the white man, which is that really any path to equality? I don't know if this is because I come from an immigrant background which had its culture erased by a different group of white supremacists in terms of the British, but I see black nationalists as allies, not people who are my enemy. I don't think they are personally gunning for my life. They want to kill me, they want to get rid of me. I recognize their specific problems, I respect it, and lots of things of what they say about capitalism, the power structure of America and Western countries in general, how we've made our wealth, I agree with. And let's keep it real, even as a white person, someone who appears white like myself, who is the bigger threat to me? White nationalists or black nationalists? We know 100% it's white nationalists who would actually do violence against me. It's white nationalists who would kill me. I've had my own experience of Nazis who said that I'm not even white because I have dark features, and because I'm a socialist as well, they would happily kill me. And despite being a white person, I don't think I'm going to get that same sort of rhetoric from black nationalists because that's not what they're about. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the video. Sorry if it comes across as a bit condescending as a white guy talking about black nationalism, but I thought as watching another white guy speak about black nationalism in a very, very negative way, I kind of wanted to address that and talk about it and try and be a better ally where I'm not equivocating white nationalism with black nationalism. I'm not both sidesing it. I'm recognizing why one has a legitimate reason to exist and why one is total bullshit, which is just a backlash at racists not having absolute power anymore. Anyway, if you want to find me on social media, follow me at The Cavernacle on Twitter, that is my main one, but also Facebook and Instagram. Also check out my Reddit, which is r/thecavernacle, and u/Tommy Cahill, that's my personal one. Check out my Patreon and WordPress in the description, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.